I might
Hello.
take it off screen share just so we can all. I don't know about you guys. I can't sort of see everyone that well. Let's do that.
Oh, look at that.
So that's a bit better. So what I'll do, I'll hand over to Tiff now to sort of start proceedings officially, but just a very warm welcome to you all. And I'm Josh Lorenz, by the way. I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Social Services. Great. Thanks, Tiff.
Thanks, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is, hello. It's lovely to see so many of you, some familiar faces and some I haven't met yet in person, but hope to one day soon. So as Josh said, my name is Tiffany Davis. I'm part of the Emerging Leaders Network. It's been a wonderful initiative to be part of. Thanks to Catholic Social Services Victoria for keeping us going over these last couple of years. It's been wonderful to connect with so many. Really good to be with you this afternoon. As we gather, I just wanted to start us off by acknowledging most of you would know that today is the start of National Reconciliation Week, which is an initiative that seeks to provide opportunities to learn more about our shared histories and cultures here in Australia and to celebrate that. And the theme for this year's National Reconciliation Week is In This Together, which I believe was established pre-COVID-19, but seems pretty apt in these times that we find ourselves. So as we begin our session today, I'd just like to, on your behalf, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we each stand and pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge and honour their stories, their traditions and living cultures, and commit ourselves to building a brighter and more connected future together. And certainly this is one of the ways that we might do this through this network. So thank you for you all for being here. And I'd now like to pass over to Pip to get us started.
Thanks so much, Tiff, and to Josh for welcoming us as well. I think since this event is taking place in National Reconciliation Week, it feels very apt to begin with our acknowledgement as we usually do. I'm very grateful to Rachel and Andy for their willingness to be part of this conversation today, and my own welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to see so many people on this Zoom gathering. Rachel and Andy, before we jump into our conversation, I wonder if each of you would mind introducing yourself to the group, perhaps starting with you, Rachel.
Oh, thanks, Pip, and hello to everyone. It's good to be with you all. I can see some really familiar faces. It's hard to not be able to reach out and hug you. I'm Loretto's sister. I live in Hawthorn in Melbourne, originally from Adelaide, and I work as a physiotherapist, and I work voluntarily at Cabrini. They have a health hub at Brunswick, working with asylum seekers in the refugee health hub there. Although it's my work's on hold at this stage, can't put my hands on anyone. And then I'm also working as a spiritual director and supervisor of ministries and accompanying people in their faith life. And I work with Mary Ward International as a Loretto sister with volunteers and as the Director of Vocations for IBVM Loretto. Now that'll do. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, I'm Andy Hamilton, and also working in Melbourne over many years now. The main job's really writing for Jesuit communications, Eureka Street, Australian Catholics and other things, but also with Jesuit Social Services and contributing to websites and opinion pieces and stuff like that. And well, at the moment, there's a few other things, a lot of other irons in the fire, but I'm afraid that the fire's gone out for about the last few months as you can't get in touch with anyone. So I'm enjoying solitude at the moment.
Thanks, Andy. So
is my voice coming across strong enough too?
it is for me, and a lot of other people are nodding, so it sounds good. So the title for today's session is Creativity in a Time of Crisis. And we wanted to seize the opportunity in this unusual time to have a discussion about what are some of the realizations that we might be having in this time? What are the things that we think that our different traditions might teach us about these kinds of moments? And how might we be intentional about how we move through some of the unusual elements of this time and the changes that will occur as we enter the new normal that a lot of people are referring to. So to start our conversation off, I wanted to put to each of you the question of, what do you think that our tradition might say about this moment? And when I say tradition, I guess I'm using it in the broad sense of social services, health, education, the Catholic tradition. I know that both of you, for both of you, the Ignatian tradition is very close to your heart. So I wonder what your interpretation of that question is, and perhaps we might start with you, Andy.
Thanks, Pip. Yeah. Well, I guess for me, that the key part of that question is when you say this moment, what does the tradition say about this moment? And so the question for me is, what is this moment? And for me, I think there's probably two sides to it. The first is, I think, just the general uncertainty of the position we're in at the moment, the uncertainty of the moment, but that is also uncertainty about even what the moment is itself, isn't it? You know, what is it that we're going through at the moment? It's very hard to look from inside a storm and really describe it, isn't it, from outside? But I would say, so the first point about is uncertainty. But I think the second point about the moment, and here we're looking ahead as well, both of these things are true. The other part of the moment is the just the, I suppose, the confinement, that we're going to be confined in different ways economically, but probably also in terms of space and so forth, pretty much for the foreseeable future. So how do we work with that? What does the tradition say? Well, for me, I suppose I'm looking at the Catholic tradition, but also to some extent the tradition of going out to the people who are marginalised within that Catholic tradition. I think what the tradition says, that in any situation of crisis, of uncertainty, where you seem to be losing wholesale, that what happens, significant things that happen, are really, generally speaking, a group of young people get together and decide to do something, and that has ramifications. So I'm thinking here of the Frederick Ozanam student in Paris, just getting together with a few others, and what came out of that is the Vinnies, of course. And I'm thinking also, I suppose, if you look at your, the heroes and heroines of Christian history, for me, Nano Nagel, who founded the Presentation Sisters, who had the misfortune of teaching me when I was very young. But Nano Nagel, just a stunning young woman in Paris, privileged young woman, sent to study out of Ireland, couldn't learn in Ireland, but then decides in the middle of the penal period there, where Catholics aren't allowed to have formal teaching, Catholic schools can't exist, just simply goes back with a few mates back to Ireland and starts schools in the hedgerows and things. And again, what came out of that into the 20th century is quite remarkable, isn't it? So I think just more recently, even I think of the Vannies, really. that, as I remember the story, was that I think the Indian sisters, the missionaries of charity, had to stop they had a food kitchen, but they had to stop it at one stage. And then these kids got together and with an old ramshackle van and make soup and stuff in it, and then started driving around the suburbs. And we have now I think one of the very encouraging things in Melbourne for all of us really is the vans, isn't it? The soup vans. So these are I suppose that's the first thing which the tradition tells us about. So it's about coming together, that in a time when everything separates, people coming together with a good idea and then sparking life off each other. So that probably says something to this group here too, doesn't it? The other thing, though, the key thing I think which it says also is just the key thing it speaks to us, our tradition, is about reflectiveness, whether you call reflectiveness prayer or whatever categories you put it under, but just reflecting on who you are, where you are, what the situation is that you're in. Well, that's central. So they'd be the things that I see our tradition as speaking to us about.
Thanks so much, Andy. I like how you started with that image of the storm. I think that that's helpful for us, and I think that those examples really bring to life other times when people have been creative out of difficulty. Rachel, I wonder what your thoughts are on that question.
Yeah, I think my first thoughts were as a health professional looking at the Catholic social teaching of reverence for life and essential dignity. And then my heart went out to the most vulnerable and that preferential option for the poor. And in a time of crisis, you know, now more than ever, the most vulnerable are hurting. And then after last week, which was celebrating Laudato Si, 5 years since Laudato Si, Pope Francis's encyclical on the need to care for our common home, I've been thinking a bit about how this virus, this threatening virus, comes from nature. And so this period offers us the opportunity to question what our relationship with nature and Earth as common home have been, and how should they be. Medicine and technology are not enough. You know, their function is to attack the virus and exterminate it. But if we continue to attack our living Earth, you know, she will keep counterattacking, and that'll be with even more lethal pandemics. And I have a sense that the majority of our leaders don't realise that we are that interconnected with nature. We're its conscious part. And, you know, as Western society particularly, our relationship has been merely one of use for our own comfort and well-being, and we're violently exploiting the earth to the point that 60% of the land has been eroded, and 60% of the rainforests have been gone, and 70 to 100,000 species are extinguished each year. And I think, you know, if we continue on this path, we'll come face to face with our own extinction. And with Laudato Si, you know, there's this tradition in our thinking from St. Francis up to even Pope John Paul II at World Peace Day in 1990. He made that connection that care for creation's not, you can't separate it from care of the poor. And if we really believe that, we need to use this time to reimagine and to live differently. And the Gospels, you know, if we go back to the Gospels, our tradition is to love radically and to love our neighbours as ourselves, etc. So it's just I think it's a really important time, and we have no choice but to really collectively come together and move into this ecological conversion that Pope Francis is calling us into.
Thanks, Rachel. That was very powerful. I think there's a lot to take in there about our interconnectedness with nature. And I love what you say about that you can't separate care of creation from care of the poor. So having named this moment a little bit, or some elements of this moment, can we talk a little bit about how we might approach or prepare for whatever this new normal is? And I wonder what has occurred to each of you, you know, whether there are simple practices or things to be intentional about as we kind of move through this time. Maybe starting with you, Rachel.
Yeah, I think getting in touch with our own spirituality is at the heart of the matter, you know, what it is that binds each of us to ultimate meaning and purpose, what fires us up and gives us energy and life. And, you know, for me, the Ignatian and Mary Ward tradition of silence and deep listening to the movement of the spirit and discernment, making choices around what increases my desire and the collective desire of the group. I just, you know, I can imagine if we all move into that space of listening deeply together and knowing that each of us listens in a unique way, how amazing it would be if we really could listen to the spirit and what we're called to do and to move into a new realm of consciousness, really, and lead from that place. So yeah, meditative, I love imaginative contemplation. I think this is a time when you talk about creativity, if we can, you know, enter into that space, allow God to work, or the spirit, the creator, to work in our imaginations and get in touch with that. I found myself, and I can't believe I'm admitting this to all these people, but painting for the first time. And so I've got a room full of little bits of oil paint around the place. So, you know, I never knew that was in me until this time, really. So who knows where that'll go.
That's wonderful. I think that leading from that place of attentiveness to the spirit and what might be within us that we haven't discovered yet is a beautiful prospect. And Andy, how about you?
Yes, I think like Rachel, I'd be looking first, I suppose, inside ourselves. But the question I'd ask really is, what is it that we've discovered over this period of solitude, of withdrawal, but also of just looking at the way in which the coronavirus thing is, the way it's affected society and what's happened there. And seems to me that for most people, it was a time when just the importance of human beings, of each human being, really mattered more maybe than they'd taken it to be. And the fact that we'd all lock ourselves up in order that people wouldn't be going into hospital and dying. All of these things we take for granted, I suppose, in our tradition. But most of us, though, at any rate, saw these really with rather fresh eyes. And so I think what it would do for mission, it would seem to me, is not so much concrete suggestions for mission, do this or do that. But the question is just returning to the question again of what matters in what we're doing in our various agencies or various ministries or whatever. So what matters? Then to see this as that question is always a question about who matters. And so the who of the people we work for, the who of the people we work with. And it's didn't seem if it is people who have that priority, then when we start looking at what we're doing at the moment, just reflecting on ways our structures, those structured relationships going, it seems to me there's chances there to notice the points of discontinuity, where we in fact might say we're looking at people, but we're in fact looking to perpetuate the ways things have been done before, and defending all sorts of other defending positions or defending ourselves or whatever. So that opportunity, I think, to be looking freshly at what we're doing and maybe changing what it would be helpful to change, which we wouldn't have thought of really before we were in this position. So that'd be the first kind of thing. I think the other thing I see which flows from that again is to keep those fresh eyes going, and to my mind there's an opportunity really for introducing and insisting on reflectiveness in all of our processes of what we're doing. But for example, every meeting in any institution, Catholic institution or whatever, should start with a period of reflection, personal reflection. These would be the sorts of things that seem to me which would be could be introduced, which would make an enormous difference then to the way that particular meeting goes. But it will also make a difference to our capacity also to see things too. So these would be, if there's an example of something, that would be something which I think should follow. I think the third thing, it seems to me, the potential of the moment is because society is going to be more fragile, and also just because of the uncertainties we face. Well, I think that's a great chance for doing something bold, isn't it? So for thinking about outside the scope and trying something out, and just realising that the world's not going to fall apart, and even if it did, it's going to fall apart probably for us anyway. So why not give things a go? So that attitude of that Australian attitude of try it out and give it a go seems to me that ought to opens up possibilities rather than simply locking us in. So that's my answer to your question, Pips.
Thanks, Andy. And I like that you included that kind of practical example of reflection time at the start of meetings, because I feel like sometimes we can take those kinds of processes for granted. But as you say, it has an effect on the meeting, and then the constant practice of doing so has an effect on the organisation. And that invitation to boldness, I think, is a welcome one. And perhaps people are already thinking of bold things that they have already done in this time of creativity. I'm thinking about how so far we've talked a little bit about some of the key principles of our tradition: respect for human dignity, preferential option for the poor. And I'm wondering about whether there's an opportunity in this time, as we've already talked a little bit about, to really seize that kind of rejuvenated sense of mission and boldness. And I just wonder how you each see that. Perhaps starting with you, Rachel.
Yeah, I think I was reflecting on how Jesus, he was bold, disrupted the old Jewish law, and challenged us to really live radically in a new way, and we're called to do that now. And I look around, I can even look around this room and see people acting boldly in the very presence, in a self-sacrificing radical love, by putting themselves at risk and having to move perhaps from their family to care for others and to care for complete strangers. That's that same love that is mission. That is, you know, we are mission, we are love. And it's already happening. And I don't want to take that for granted. Like every hour that someone is doing that, it is amazing. And then teachers as well. And young people making the choice when, you know, they could ride this out quite easily, but they're, in some ways, but they're looking and thinking as a whole with that new consciousness and caring for the older generations. Like this is mission already happening, and yeah, we need to sit with that, I think, and draw energy from it and just continue to be energized by it, because I think it's quite extraordinary. The other thing, of course, you know, inspired particularly today, I just love that we've been given the gift of the Uluru Statement of the Heart, and to embrace it. And the time is so, we're so in need of the wisdom of our First Nations people, to learn how to listen with our bodies, to learn how to be at one in the world, in the land. And so, you know, to take that up at every opportunity, that generous offer all of us as Australians have been given by our First Nations people, I think that comes into it. And for me, you know, church is no longer in these church structures. It's getting out, and everything's sacramental, everything's of God. And it's up to us to listen together and embrace that. Something new's emerging. I've been aware that it's coming for a while, but I think this is a pivotal time in history.
Pip, it's Robina Bradley. My apologies for being late, and thank you for letting me join the meeting. I'm St Mary's House of Welcome in Fitzroy.
Thanks, Robina. Really glad that you're able to join us.
It's a great conversation so far, and I'd really love to share with everyone, because at the House of Welcome, we've really looking at our mission, our history, and we've been reflecting for 60 years. The Daughters of Charity have worked here serving soup and sandwiches and serving the most vulnerable and meeting with people in real face of need. And we've actually been reflecting that since COVID started. We almost feel like we're back where we started, because we're doing things differently to respond. And we used to proudly say we had 200 people through a day, and we would serve, you know, 170 meals a day. The team are now feeding nearly 4,000 people a week, and we've got people sending meals out to homeless people in every motel. We're feeding ACU international students that don't have anything, being able to support people that are sitting at the front door, and new vulnerability that we've never seen. And we're really now starting to bravely ask these questions about, you know, and every one of you has said, you know, what matters in our work, who do we work for, and who will we be working for in 6 months or 6 weeks or whenever time, because we know we won't go back to being the way we were, because just social distancing is requiring to change that. And rather than seeing that as a oh my gosh moment, it's actually a great moment of opportunity to ask that question of, okay, the daughters were always brave enough to pray and to think about what could we do. And so we're starting to do that, and the staff are coming along in a wonderful way to actually respond to change. And yeah, we're just waiting to see where this time, but it's a season for real reflection and wisdom and discernment over who next will we serve, where will we serve, and how do we support our staff and those who are affected, because our staff are affected, their family, their friends, our community. Our shopkeeper next door was robbed this week. He's had no income. He's a brave new little man in a small business, and you know, we're all digging into how can we help our community and local business. So I just love that mission feels so real and raw, and we're just trying to really express that, and I'm trying to seek in with the board, especially through governance and mission, what is it that we are called to now, and how can we best respond, and how will we leave knowing that the work we do is very God-inspired and missional. It's not about just being a nice homeless service in Fitzroy Street. It's actually pure mission. And so challenging questions. And if any of you've got some answers for me, please jump down and come and have a look at what we're doing and give me some wisdom.
Thanks so much, Ravina. It's really wonderful to hear about St Mary's House of Welcome thriving at this time with that really keen sense of mission and being able to support so many people. I know I've admired from afar via social media. Andy, I wonder if you have a response to that or some thoughts about this idea of a rejuvenated sense of mission.
Rejuvenated, yeah. I think my thought again was probably more for rejuvenating souls and therefore rejuvenating mission rather than directly the mission. And it seemed to me one of the key things perhaps again is to reflect on our experience of this break and to ask ourselves how through this through the break that the coronavirus has been, what of the changes of life that we had were in fact positive, and which of them did we learn over this time something which makes a more human life, therefore a more faith-filled life for us in our ministry. And I suppose, because as always, I really only think fairly concretely of that, but I must say for myself, there were things which I discovered which should really be rather more part of my life than they are at the moment, and then the ministry would be more helpful too, such as just having the opportunity to go for about 3/4 of an hour's walk in the park very early in the morning for exercise, but also that just being a time really of quite often quite deep sense of God's presence, but also just a wonder at the beauty of nature, just taking me into a completely different world from the world in which I'm writing or doing other things. And so having that deep sense of gratitude for being part of this world and being invited into this world to serve, well then that for me is something that's extremely enriching for mission. I suppose the other thing I discovered was just having really more time, not having to travel to work, not having to go to meetings and all that sort of stuff, but also had more time to do what I really like doing, which is write a bit of poetry, which seems about as far away from ministry, doesn't it, as possible. But together with that, if you're going to write poetry, well, then you need somebody to try it out on. So gathering people together to listen to me reading my poetry, this again was a very satisfactory form of ministry. But again, it's more the question of what gives you life, but how can what gives you life then be made? How can that be made into something which you share, and in which that sharing really blesses the work that you're doing? This poetry does, I think, prose and that sort of thing. So I guess that for me, I guess it's those kind of, they're the sort of things that I would see in terms of asking that sort of question about how we carry on, where do we find life, and how do we nurture that life, and then so automatically that life will flow into what we do. But the third thing then I think is, as I was saying before, really, is that it's a great chance to experiment the way things have been done, the way things we've been doing things before aren't the ways we need to do them. They're not necessarily the best ways to do them. Why not try a few new things? So just be bold and So I think, you know, because to end this with might be two spiritual quotations. Neither of them, I'm afraid, by a Catholic, but there you are. One's by Thomas Cromwell, or Oliver Cromwell, said, "Trust in God, keep the gunpowder dry." So, as an attitude, it seems to me perfect, the trusting in God, but then being bold and resolute in what you're doing. The third, in an uncertain time, is that if the world does fall in on top of you, everything falls on top of you, the whole thing collapses. This is the rock bottom advice, which is from Samuel Beckett. One of his characters says, "I'm still alive." That might come in handy. So they're the two things that I would take out at this time.
Thanks, Andy. There have been some real quotable quotes in this conversation so far, so thank you. And I love that both of you have talked about your own artistic pursuits, oil painting and poetry writing. I think that's very fitting. In a minute, I'm going to open it up to ask if people would like to ask a question. I just wonder if Rachel, you have any thoughts on perhaps things for us to pay attention to or be intentional about at this time, if there's anything else you wanted to add.
There's plenty, but I guess in giving space to the contemplative life and giving it a go if one hasn't already. The idea of being the more interior I journey, the more I go out and can see and discover what is out there in the world as well. So it's not a selfish thing, but it's a enriching and an enlivening way to be. And so that means, often it means being comfortable in silence and listening. As a physio, I love listening to the body as a place of revelation, listening to my breathing and my heartbeat and where I'm holding tension, what attracts me, what gives me life. And so it's that body listening and heart listening, not just head stuff. And however that is for people, whether it's music or art or creation, finding one's own spirituality and going on the journey with company, often accompaniment. We need each other.
Thanks, Rachel. And thanks to both of you for what you've shared so far. I have asked a few people to prepare a short comment and ask a question. So I might start with you, Romina, if that's okay, if you're happy to introduce yourself and go ahead.
Oh, my name's Romina. I work for the Salesians of Don Bosco. So that's a religious order focused on young people, particularly disadvantaged young people, and our real focus is education. So my current role is our youth ministry coordinator. So I guess that's from where I'm coming. I work in youth ministry. I guess thinking about creativity in this time, I guess something that is a constant complaint for me in my job is that there seems to always be a lack of time and space for creativity. That was the first thing I was reflecting on. I feel like I'm often so busy and don't often get the time to sit around and just have a meeting where the purpose is to brainstorm, not to make decisions and do things. And that has always been a point of tension for me. So I guess during the different phases of this pandemic and the phases that it's caused in my work, it's been really interesting because initially there was like this forced action where we had to cancel and change and adapt. But then this huge wave of creative energy seemed to come out, all these ideas. And a lot of them, to be honest, were inspired by the young people that I work with, many of whom were really frustrated that a lot of their things, their events were being cancelled, and sort of spark some ideas in those of us who plan these things for them. So it's been an interesting sort of, yeah, I guess a sense of permission to be creative is something that's come out of this for me, in a strange way. But I suppose just 3 blessings that I was reflecting on that have come out. The first one's really a practical one, just that it's been a time where I've gotten to better understand the digital realm. As a semi-young, still young person, I thought I had a pretty good handle on that. But I guess I work with teenagers and young adults, and their experience of reality is so, I guess, coloured by the way they interact with social media and digital media. And I've just gotten to better understand that. And it's helped me to think way more creatively in terms of work and planning and that sort of thing. The second has been this permission to stop, permission to be creative, permission to try something at work that might fail, but let's do it anyway because we might learn from it. And the third thing has been this blessing of a broadening, and I think, Rachel, you touched on it, but a broadening of the understanding of church and what that means, and the fact that we can create a sense of church online or over the phone. And also just another practical thing, that we haven't been bound by geographical boundaries as we normally are. I can speak to groups of young people in every state in Australia at the same time, and then they can speak to each other, and it's free. And that's awesome because it allows us to include a lot more young people than we normally would. So they're just some of my reflections. A question though that I had thought of, something that has been really interesting to me throughout this entire pandemic is its global nature, I suppose. And unlike other kinds of struggle or trauma that our world has faced and will continue to face, that seem to only tangibly impact a small portion of the world's population, I feel like everyone has a direct experience of coronavirus in some way. And that's really unique, I feel. So my question is, how can we take that unique element of this struggle, its global nature, the fact that everyone's been touched by it in some way, and how do we use that or turn that element of it into something that can help us to do our work better or to be more creative in our work? So just the global nature of this struggle, how can we tap into that and use it as something that can benefit us and the people that we serve going forward?
Thanks so much, Romina. I'll leave it up to Rachel or Andy to jump in there.
I wonder if perhaps you might summarise the question for me. If I could apologise to Romina, my hearing's not crash hot.
No worries.
They're not asking
I'll try.
you, but perhaps if Pip could just summarise the question briefly, that might be helpful. Make sure I'm not answering totally the wrong question.
Okay, so I'll have a go at summarising. Thanks so much, Romina. That was a wonderful question and comment. Romina was talking about a few different blessings that this time has really brought in for us, including kind of that opportunity to be bold, as you were talking about, Andy, and be creative and try something for the first time, even if it might fail. Yeah. And then Romina was really asking about, since we're now so aware of our connectedness on an international scale as well, I guess how might that kind of inform how we move forward, that new awareness?
Thanks very much. Yeah, no, that's fine. So how do we move really from what's immediate to ourselves into just to cope with the international dimensions of coronavirus? I think, I suppose just to start off, perhaps the risk of focusing, the risk when you do focus, the necessary risk when you focus on something that is huge and international, is to be totally overwhelmed by it. And so what can poor little me do about it? At least that's when I find the risk of sort of putting the question as largely as that, as I say, that's a risk. So how do you include that and work with it in such a way that you don't paralyse yourself? That's the way I put the question, I guess. And I think the key thing again is our own reflection, that reflectiveness that we have, which is that we're aware of ourselves and limitations and all of those sort of things. But we also attend to the very large relationships in our world, and we do keep people in our thoughts and our prayers. And when we're looking at our own society, we also look at ourselves in relationship to other societies. So we have a habit of looking at the whole, if you like, the whole big picture, and the very personal picture and the personal relationships we've got with the Ramina, the young people that you're working with, and you know so well. So I think that's what I would say. But then I think, how do we work in ministry with it? I think it's really in constantly bringing that larger picture into our conversations and into the way in which we do anything. So the prayers we form automatically have both small and the large together. And if we're talking about any situation, well, then we're likely to be mentioning that larger context too. And so that in the people we're working with, I guess we hope that that kind of global plus personal, the integration of the global and the personal, that then communicates itself to the people we're working with. And then probably, I guess, other people might also be creative in finding ways, particularly young people, creative in finding ways of actually making that international, if you like, that larger than national aspect of things, part of the things that they're doing. But if we're working on social media, well, it's okay to have people. This is terrific, isn't it? You can, you can have people, if you do a mass down here, you can have people from Brisbane and people from Adelaide and everybody joining it. It's great. Yeah, well, why not people in Afghanistan, and why not people in Iran, and why aren't we? Why isn't the scope of our interest then, and what we're doing within our work international, in a way that I'd never understand the technology of, but young people, that's just bread and butter, isn't it? Younger people than myself. Mm-hmm. So that's just a few thoughts.
Thanks, Andy.
I'm not sure, Romina, though, if that answered your question.
No, that was really great. Thanks, Andy.
In the interest of time, I might pass to Tara Peters for a comment and a question. Tara's joining us from Western Australia, and so it's exciting that our reach is far and wide. So over to you. Thanks, Tara.
Thanks, Pip. Look, fantastic to be part of the conversation from WA. And I know there's a few other WA people on the call, which is fantastic. One of the things that's coming to mind through the conversation is that while we've all been in this together, we've certainly not all experienced it in the same way. And so my context and my experience is as a director of mission at a public-private hospital where we've been very busy. We've been looking after patients with COVID-19, as I'm sure others around the WebEx have as well. And, I found myself kind of listening with a sense of envy about the space and the time and the walks and all of that, and I know for some of our leaders as well, they're waiting for that opportunity, and we're having to create those opportunities, whether it's please take some leave. And we have absolutely benefited from our practice of reflection. And if I could just park there for a little bit. So an example is we ran a reflection with our leadership team, and we started talking about this new normal. And we thought, well, things will never be the same, or will they? Will we just go back to the way things used to be? And we had a conversation about what's enabled us to respond well to COVID-19. What do we have to put some intentionality around keeping in play, and what might we need to do differently to make sure that we don't lose the opportunity that COVID has presented us in terms of maybe working together better. So there's that observation. I guess another observation, and this is probably where my question might come from, is I've never heard people be so grateful to be able to come to work, you know, where it's not been work to earn a living per se, it's been work to make a contribution, work knowing that you're making a difference. And that's not just our nurses and doctors, you know. I have observed many times over our cleaners in our hospital, people just walking past and stopping and thanking them for the work that they're doing. And maybe back to your original question, Pip, about what does our tradition say to the value of work and what that means for us as human beings. So I might just leave it there in the interest of time.
Thanks, Tara. Rachel, I wonder if you've got any thoughts in response.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. Yeah, I mean, our tradition says a lot about vocational dignity, and it's everyone is to be given that right to live if they want to, if they choose to, in a way that just enlivens them, gives them energy, it expresses who they're called to be in the world, be it the precious cleaners and the precious nursing staff. And we're all unique, thank goodness, and have a unique call. So getting in touch with that, which I think is linked to what you were saying before, the conversations at depth, you know, those deep, our tradition names them spiritual conversations, where when I'm listening to someone and something in me shifts and I'm transformed, my heart's transformed. And I truly believe that spiritual conversations, whether it's one-on-one or with a group, leads to transformation. And transform people, transform others. And we're community and communal, and it's powerful. And we might try and go back, but when we're transformed, we won't be comfortable going back. And so we'll be searching for the more, and there's always more. We live in this extraordinary universe that keeps growing. And so getting in touch with that ultimate power and energy, and conversing about it. And I know in these busy hospitals, etc., administration and on the wards, there's no time to sit down and really spend time in silence together. But the power of those one-on-one conversations, or just a glance, when that just knowing glance, that's transformative. When someone meets you where you're at, or invites you into who you are, and you both know something's happened. So that, you know, it's amazing how it can be just in an instant too. And to value that, and it sounds like, you know, with reflective practice, somehow how you fit that in, it's just, I can't confirm that more. It's so important.
Thanks, Rachel. That's really wonderful. Now, Laura has agreed to ask a question on behalf of someone else. So just like a Q&A episode, we've had the question submitted. So Alicia Deek is Ignatian Coordinator and Justice Service Coordinator at St Ignatius College in Geelong. So she's got a question from that education perspective, and Laura's going to ask that on her behalf. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Pip. And thank you to Andy and Rachel. Your insight this afternoon has been tremendous. So thank you, given us a lot of food for thought. Alicia has a question. So from a teacher's perspective, I observed that during our time in lockdown, education was highly valued by our society for what teachers achieve in the classroom, including things like student wellbeing, academic performance and development, routine and pastoral care. In Victoria, our junior and senior students have just returned to school, and yet the conversation has already shifted back to education, merely being a service that produces academic outcomes and performance. And so a question is, how can we continue to value education as more than just a service as things return to normal?
Thanks, Laura. And Laura, do you mind introducing yourself to us as well?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I'm Laura, and I work out at Edmund Rice Services, Mount Atkinson, as a community development officer. So based out in Melbourne's West. We've had, all of our service delivery has stopped. So we've spent a lot of time as a team. There's the three of us getting creative and spending more time getting things ready for a startup ministry. So I haven't been a team for too long. So it's been nice to have that time to be together and get things ready to go for when things start to ease up a little.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for explaining your context and introducing yourself. I'm conscious that it is 4 o'clock, so if anyone does need to leave, that's completely fine. Andy, I'm wondering if you have any comments on Alicia's question there about education.
Yeah, yes, to Alicia's question. Spontaneous answer is good luck. How do you stop people from moving from education as a relationship, you might say, to achievement and to future, etc., etc. But I think what I think what the question's asking for really is it's a large question about what you value in yourself and what you value in other people and the values society puts on things. And I think to my mind, I guess question goes back to the previous question too, is about work. That how does your understanding of work change through the coronavirus? And to my mind, the key thing about it is that the key thing is about both education, but also about the work we do anywhere, the work you do as teaching and work students do. That work is not a contract, it's a gift. So that concept of school being a gift in which the person's developing themselves in knowledge and so forth, that they're receiving a gift in that, but also that gift is being given to others. Similarly in teaching, it's a teaching as a gift to others, but also it's a gift which you're receiving the interest of others, and what you say and so forth is also a gift. So I think if it's got that overriding sense of things, in which achievement is not put as me, but achievement is about us. It's about giving and receiving. Everything is about relationship, and if that's consistent in the life of the school, that what does the school rejoice in? Well, it rejoices in the success of students, but because that's a gift to them and they're receiving a gift. But you're looking far beyond. So you don't have that sense of what you're doing is simply a preparation for something, or it's a down payment for cash that's going to come in afterwards when you get your law degree, and then you can charge enormous sums and all that sort of stuff. But there's that element of gift in it. It's about looking at your church, it's looking at your school environment to say, well, where do you challenge that understanding that this is about me, just about me, but also how then do you get that broader sense of mutual gift in it? So I think that, I'm sorry, I'm losing myself there. But that'll be the lines of the answer anyway. Well, it's not, but again, I'd say, having said that, I'd come back to my first words is good luck.
Thanks, Andy. I love that idea of mutual gift that you expressed there. Rachel, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we pass over to Mark?
I can't help but add something on verity or truth, knowing that Alicia, I think, is a Mary Ward woman. That's our tradition, the Mary Ward tradition, and just holding on to that sense of truth, of knowing, you know, what, as an educator, how precious it is, even if it's not realised around me, and I'm oppressed in that. You know, I know that education is vital, and there is a verity, a truth in that. So it'll be hard, no doubt about that. But I think a lot of people have woken up to the gift of our educators in this country and beyond, and you know, and that's a transformation.
Thanks, Rachel. And Andy, I think Alicia will really appreciate your answers to her question when she watches the recording. Mark, I'll pass over to you if that's okay.
No worries. Thanks, Pip. And mostly as a matter of bringing it all to a close is to thank you, Andy and Rachel, for the wisdom, the depth, the encouragement you've provided in your answers, to be present to what we might be experiencing and seeing at the moment. And our eyes may be glancing forward to something that could be exciting. And I hear encouragement from you to go that way and to trust in ourselves. So thank you for your time and your depth in what you've given to us this afternoon. And alongside that, to Josh with all the IT and representative, thanks for CSSV's ongoing support with this and getting it up and running. Tiff, our acknowledgement of country and grounding us to start this on the start of the week of Reconciliation Week. Beautifully set up. And I think most of all to you, Pip, you've basically put most of this together. You've just led this conversation so smoothly, and your attunement to listening to the gold throughout the conversation is a wonderful skill. So thank you very much for that. And for everyone to joining in on listening. I saw many people that I interpreted as writing down notes and thoughts and looking out the window. Oh, yes, that hit the spark for me. So we appreciate your attendance. And as a matter of concluding, down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button, and we'd welcome one or two responses. One might be a word that sits with you after what you've listened to this afternoon. And if you choose to go to the second level of, is there any feedback or reaction you'd like to provide to us that perhaps poses another question that is of value for us to consider? More of this, something else. It's an opportunity to give us any of your wisdom back as well. We're happy to hear it. As we've expressed, we're a community, so let's all tip in together. So that chat button's down the bottom there for you to react in however you choose, knowing that it is a public response that goes on that chat. So amongst our community here of 30 odd people. Yeah, and otherwise it's thanks for attending and good afternoon.